Welcome to the Safety and Risk Success podcast with me, Christian Harris. My guest today is Richard Pendry, who is an internationally acclaimed security risk management expert. He's an author of lots of standards, as well as an author of a fiction book, which we will quickly speak about at the end of the podcast as well. A real expert in the world of security, and keen to discuss today the idea of convergence between security and safety and share his insights on what you as a safety professional could know, should know, will want to know about security and how you can start to consider that and the benefits that that will bring. So I'm sure you'll get a lot from this one, and hopefully give you some things to think about and advance the goal that we all have, both in safety and security, of safer, more secure, more profitable, better organisations to work in. Hope you enjoy it. Cheers.
Welcome to the Safety and Risk Success podcast with Christian Harris. We believe that proactive safety and risk management powers business performance. Each week we explore this theme, sharing guests, stories, insights, trends, hints and tips. You can find us on all the major podcasting platforms, and video versions are available on YouTube. But for now, let's join the conversation with Christian.
Thanks for joining me today, Richard.
An absolute pleasure.
Good stuff. So you have worked in some really high stakes environments, probably fair to say. So how have those experiences shaped your approach to risk and crisis management?
Well, I started off back in 2005. I had a telephone call. A colleague, an ex-military colleague of mine, was looking for people to go to Iraq. And I mentioned it to my wife. My wife thought I was having a bit of a midlife crisis. And she said, you know what, off you go, get it out of your system for 6 months. This is back this time in 2005, 20 years ago. Exactly.
20 years ago.
And she said, yeah, go off 6 months, get it out your system and come back and we can crack on. 20 years later, I'm still involved in the industry. I thoroughly enjoyed my time in Iraq, 2.5 years there. I came back to the UK. I found it a bit vanilla. Then I went off to Afghanistan for 6 odd years, up to 2015, and then I was frightened of actually painting myself into a corner in Afghanistan. So I started to do some consultancy work, and I worked all over the place in Africa, northwest, north, east, and West Africa, working for various organizations. So yeah, I have been around. I have been around a bit.
Good stuff. But yeah, back to the vanilla now, living in the UK.
Yeah, well, do you know what? I was traveling over COVID, and it was absolutely horrendous. I was back and forth to various places in Africa, and it just put me off. It really, really did. And I thought, I turned down going to Ukraine because it's too cold for me. I'm intrigued with Gaza, but I think I'll leave it until it's all died down a little bit, and then I want to go over and have a look there to see what's actually happened. But I'm quite happy working from home now, and I'm concentrating on the UK domestic market.
Yeah. Well, there's certainly lots of geopolitical shenanigans happening, aren't there? So there's probably ample opportunities.
It's having a massive impact on security within the UK and Europe, and indeed the rest of the world. But massive.
So we were keen to sort of chat about kind of blurring the boundaries between safety and security. Obviously, the audience for this podcast is typically focused more on safety. So you've spoken about how the risks in the modern world are often blurring the lines between safety and security. Could you give some examples of what you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, and it comes down to security convergence. So I'm going to park that term off to the side for a minute, and I just want to I just wanted to talk about the similarities
Mm,
and the differences between safety and security. Okay.
yeah.
So, we understand that safety is an unintentional act. It just happens. Somebody falls off a ladder or slips or whatever. It's unintentional. It just happens. As opposed to a security event, okay, a security incident where it's an intentional act.
Yeah.
It involves an adversary. Somebody wants to do you harm. Okay, so that is that's one of the differences. The other difference is the lexicon, the actual definitions that we use. So within the health and safety environment, we talk about hazards.
Yeah.
In security, we talk about threats.
Mhm.
But I'll ask you a question, and I don't want to put you on the spot here, but
Go on.
when we look at a risk assessment, are there any differences, do you think, between a health and safety risk assessment and a security risk assessment?
Um, that's a good question. I'd have thought that the principles of how you would approach it would be similar in terms of the mindset you'd need to have, but there'd probably be some different sort of buckets of categories that you'd need to look at, and certain areas you'd need to look at in a lot more detail for a security risk than a health and safety risk assessment. That would be my
Yeah,
instinctive
I mean,
reaction.
you're on the sort of right track there. I mean, basically, the methodology that we use for the risk assessment is the same.
Hmm.
We go through the same process. We look at hazard or threat and take that across then likelihood, impact, and come up with the risk, because we always identify a threat and we calculate the risk. So,
Yeah.
with that sort of similarity there, I mean, we should, in my opinion, be working towards a identified goal, and bringing that convergence, that
Hmm.
security convergence term, which we just bringing that back in. When we look at convergence, convergence is the operational structure. We bring together the various departments within an organization, obviously security, health and safety, logistics. We can bring in HR, all really important so that we can holistically manage the risk. And what I do as a consultant is I try to ensure that my clients fully understand what risks that they're facing
Mhm.
and only spend the money that they need to. So if you've already got an asset there, a department there, why not utilize that to reduce your costs, because it's already functioning. Bring it
Yeah.
in, security convergence.
Yeah. That
So,
makes good sense. Yeah. So what would be the kind of first steps then that somebody should take, to try to achieve that sort of holistic, collaborative approach? So, if you're in safety and you need to be working with HR and IT and logistics and so on, how would you sort of suggest people go about making that change?
well, what I would again, another question. I mean, I remember I had my own business during the 80s, and I actually remember health and safety 1974 coming in, being brought into
Yeah.
play. Okay. And within organizations, because of the legal requirements, it is a very important part of the business. And it's there, and normally it's a standalone.
Yeah.
It's a standalone department, and quite rightly so too. But when you look at security, these security is lesser. It's a lesser department. Um, Unfortunately, I was training guys recently, and the security manager said, and I'm not going to mention the big company that he is involved with, but he wasn't looking forward to going back because his office had been allocated to somebody else. And I said,
Right.
well, I said, how many people are in your office? Oh, there's three of us. I said, oh, okay. What's happening? Are we going to be split up amongst the business? And I said, so what's your office going to become? Oh, it's a leisure room. They're going to put a pool table in there. And I'm like, whoa, okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, so security is it can be the sort of orphan child, and
Yeah.
within the organization, and it can be double hatted amongst other operations and things like that, And the other thing as well is when you're planning and you're there and you're around the table and all the different department heads are there and says, anybody invite security? No, okay, well, right, yeah. So we're often the orphan child, but the thing is, with the similarities and obviously the threat and hazard identification, I can see health and safety getting a lot closer when we move forward.
Yeah.
And because of the similarities with the methodology of actually identifying the dangers to a business, I think it's a natural progression that they should at some stage or could be combined.
Yeah.
We look at ownership then. Who looks at it? Um, uh, who actually owns the risk at the end of the day,
Mm.
what department head. But I really think that it is utilizing what you've already got there anyway.
Yeah, yeah. There are some organizations that I'm aware of that have kind of joined the two up. So I can think of Hilton Hotels, for example, safety and security is in the same team. And it's my experience is that it tends to be the sort of hospitality sector organizations that the ones that I'm aware of anyway that sort of have uh, have raised the profile of security more so than a manufacturing. I've never heard of a manufacturing health and safety person talking to me about security, whereas in the hospitality world and in the sort of retail, public facing, big open spaces world, the shopping centres and train stations, that's where it seems to have that convergence seems to have started. Is that kind of your experience as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, what we also need to be able to do is threat scan, um, and look at the horizon. And we have this Martin's Law, which is going to be finalized, I think, sometime this year. And I'm actually going to be involved in writing that course, the competent persons course, later on in the year. So I'm looking forward to that. But this new legislation, publicly accessible locations, will have a big impact on organizations like the Hilton hotels, like shopping malls and things. So it's natural for me to understand that they are actually coming together, and if they are doing it, then we have to look at how are they doing it, using them as a role model to be able to roll it out into different organizations. But when we talk, remember, although we have the external risks that all businesses face, one of the biggest ones that we've got at the moment is insider risk, and it is
Right.
becoming more and more relevant with the upsets in society at the moment. Insider risk is massive, and that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, with a lot of the polarization and social media and everything seems to be black or white nowadays. There's not many shades of grey, are there, when it comes to people's opinions about things?
Absolutely, and it's awful that you can't have a conversation with people, but that's the nature of the beast at the moment. And what we're seeing is activism, part of an ideology. Ideology is really a very powerful feeling, and these activists are actually doing what they think is right, their ideology, and actually is having a detrimental effect on businesses. And I come across that quite often.
Hmm. And that internal risk, I suppose, is one that is faced by could be faced by almost any organization. Whereas,
Mm.
as we say, the sort of uh, more traditionally thought of security risks around these big public spaces and stuff is more limited to certain types of organization.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the thing is all about asset identification and criticality of those assets. What assets can you not do without? Okay. And so when we look at insider, are you aware that 30% of businesses that go bankrupt do so because of insider fraud?
No, I didn't know that.
30%. Yeah.
Hmm.
And I'll ask you a question. Again, I'm putting you on the spot. I hope you don't mind.
That's all right.
Right. If we're looking at a new employee and a more mature employee that's been with you for several years, um, who can do the most damage to your organization?
That's a very interesting question, isn't it? So, from a thinking about it with my health and safety hat on, there seems to be a almost a sort of how would you describe it? Like a sort of a sort of U-shaped curve whereby when somebody's very new to the organization, there's quite a higher risk of something going wrong from a safety perspective, and then that sort of risk deteriorates as they sort of settle in, and then it kind of starts to increase again as they've been there for a long time. So from a health and safety risk, I'd probably say it could be either, but I'd lean towards the first people that have just joined. From a sort
Yeah,
of
the newer employees.
security risk.
Yeah, I mean, the
Yeah,
thing is, logically, you think, yeah. So when we
yeah,
look at startup businesses, you think, wow, okay, you're having all these people coming in, you don't really know them and all the rest of it. They could go off, they could go off and do. Actually, it's the more mature employee,
yeah,
because
yeah,
the thing is, they have more knowledge of the business, and that is one of the intangible assets that we have. Knowledge, yeah, the
mm,
knowledge of the business, the staff knowledge of what is going on. And because you're used to seeing them in places and you give them authority to go off and access the various data and what have you, it's they are the ones that can cause you know
mm,
irreparable damage in some case and put you out of business. Yeah,
yeah,
so we need to be looking at that. That is one of the big things inside the risk. Absolutely. And if it's not on your risk register now, guys, you need to put it on there.
yeah. So is there a kind of mindset shift that a safety professional would need to take to sort of start thinking about security? Because as you said, and I like the way you put it earlier, safety is unintentional, whereas security is something that someone's planning, and obviously that's to sort of get into the uh, get away from that mindset of we're all here to try and do our best work, and sometimes bad things happen, and then we figure out why. To there's somebody who's actively looking to cause harm. It's a very different sort of way of thinking about the world, isn't it?
Well, I mean, when I think of it, I did my NEBOSH training. Okay.
Yeah,
I did a degree in security and risk management, and there was a lot of reference to health and safety. And I thought, right, I just want to close the loop on this. So I went off and I did my NEBOSH. And there is so much similarities. I think what we have within the Security Institute is it is very heavy with ex-military and ex-police.
yeah,
Okay, and they they and the cliques that come with that. But what we are seeing more and more is the emergence of the security professional, people who've gone off and done their degrees and then have
yeah,
come into the profession, with no other background. They're just a security professional. I wasn't a career solely. I only did 7 years, so however, it did actually allow me to get into the industry initially. So the answer to my question on that would be, I think that once you have this understanding of how to identify the things that can go wrong within your business, whether it's a health and safety hazard or a security risk, I think that way of looking at it is you can take it across everything.
mm,
Yeah. So
yeah,
to me, it makes a total common sense for the two themes to be, there's so much synergy.
yeah, yeah. Would you agree though that there's a risk in terms of so one of the things that I have seen over the last few years is you've got a health and safety person and they get given environmental, and then they get given sustainability, and then they get given this, and then they get given that, and obviously the more you give somebody that you can only ever sort of dilute their focus. Is there sort of a risk there around if security becomes a bolt on to the health and safety person,
Absolutely.
and if so, how do you sort of address that?
Yeah, I mean, mission creep. Yeah, to use that term, you get given this, and then you've dealt with that. Well, right, have
Yeah,
that, and
yeah,
yeah, I think so, and yeah, I mean, it's down to effectiveness then, isn't it? Are you just doing tick box, or are you really making a difference? Because one of the things, I mean, Health and safety and security, we are seemed to take from the table, and we don't actually provide money. However, we should be able to articulate that to the C-suite in actually what we're actually saving them.
Yeah.
And we need to be able to articulate that. We need to be able to show what we're actually saving. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, mission creep is definite. However, these things need to be addressed, don't they? Because
Yeah.
they are vitally important. And I always bring up um, the example of the Pan Am airline,
Yep.
Lockerbie, yeah. And there's that picture, that iconic picture of the aircraft nose in the field in Scotland, Pan Am, and then 2 years later, Pan Am ceased to exist because it had so much reputational damage on it that
Yeah.
it couldn't, nobody thought nobody would fly with them anymore because they thought they weren't safe. It's perception. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's customer perception. And we really need to understand what are the important assets of your business that you cannot do without. And reputation is right up there.
Yeah. Yeah. So is that how you would sort of suggest, and how you've seen it work well, being done in real life, people to articulate that value? Because it is the big challenge, isn't it? How do you prove prevention? It's very hard to prove something that hasn't happened, if you know
Oh
what I
yeah,
mean. So
yeah.
obviously, if you've got, in my world, if you've got 100 sites and you've got 10 people slipping over and hurting themselves per site per year, and you can reduce that, obviously you can sort of prove that. But in the world of uh, safety from the perspective of like a really serious event or a security threat, a really serious security threat, obviously if you've prevented that from happening, there's nothing to compare it to. So how do you go about sort of trying to encourage the board, and influence the board to invest in this?
Well, that's right. I mean, the board, you're trying to get money for something that might happen. Why should I spend money on this? Because it might happen. It's you being able to articulate what it looks like. What does that event look like? So, what I always say, that when we come down to likelihood and impact, which is what we use to calculate the risk,
Yeah.
it's actually good to talk rather than a risk matrix with fancy colors and all the rest of it, to actually put it in to a percentage, a likelihood
Hmm.
percentage, and an impact value. So when you're talking to the board, the impact of this actual for example, a terrorist attack on our particular business would be this amount of money. So when we look at the death of an individual, for example,
Yeah.
£1 million, rough figure. Could
Yeah.
be more, could be less,
Yeah.
depending on the importance of the individual.
Yeah.
So we have to be able to talk in a language, financial language, that the decision makers understand, because their backgrounds are not they're not coming. They don't have our knowledge. The
No.
accountants, solicitors, etc., entrepreneurs, they don't know. So we have to be able to tell them in a way. One of the biggest things that I say to people, to organizations, and it's across the board, is that they have to have a really good way of saving and collecting and saving data.
Yeah.
Because without that, and I know is more specific within the health and safety, because you have to record, but to be able to again, to see if you're effective, you need to be able to have a baseline to move forward from.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Incident
That makes
reporting.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Quite a few conversations recently, actually, on the podcast about this theme of how do you quantify prevention, and it's a very difficult thing. But I suppose the real difficulty is, if you think about a big terrorist event or something like that, the cost of that could be absolutely astronomical. Um, from a physical buildings to a loss of trade to a reputation and loss of life, et cetera, et cetera. So that number in your table, might be 50 million or 100 million.
Yeah.
But obviously the likelihood of that is very, very low. So it's kind of how do you, it's then figuring out how to um, make a proportional investment in preventing that, isn't it? Which it may never happen, but obviously if it did happen, that could wipe a business out, couldn't it, financially? So
Oh,
you've
oh,
got to
absolutely.
do
What I
something,
would
yeah.
say is for anybody out there at the moment, look at terrorism insurance. Because
Mm,
the thing is, if you've got terrorism insurance, um, you will have interruption.
mhm.
So when we look at something like the Salisbury attack, where the whole area, there was a whole commercial area that
Yeah,
was, cordoned off for months and months and months. If your normal insurance is not going to cover you, you need to have terrorism interruption insurance. And there's
yeah,
an interesting statistic with this, is that using that Salisbury as an example, and you can extrapolate that out to COVID actually. After an incident like that, a prolonged shutdown, 30% of the businesses will never open.
yeah,
Yeah. Another 30% will actually, 33% will, the
yeah,
third will open, struggle for a couple of years and then close down. But the other part of it, the last third, those businesses will take advantage of that commercial disruption and the marketplace to actually do better. Yeah.
yeah,
But please check that you have proper insurance for terrorism.
yeah, yeah. I don't know if it's going to be released before or after this interview, but um, also this week, recording this, had a great conversation with Ben Cooney, who's a risk and insurance professional, and we spoke about making sure that when you're buying insurance, read what it says and make sure you understand what you're actually covered for and what you're not. So yeah, that very much
Yeah. Yeah.
aligns to that.
Yeah, but that then ties back what you're covered for. That then ties back to what your assets. For me, the primary thing with when I do my security risk assessments is identify the asset I'm trying to protect. If
Yeah,
it's critical and it's vulnerable, because we haven't got enough time. We haven't got enough money. So we have to look through the lens of criticality.
yeah,
Um, and you can justify that I spent more money on this because this is higher in our critical list.
yeah, yeah. Makes good sense, and it's a very logical way of approaching it, isn't it? And I suppose that's one of the benefits of maybe getting a consultant like yourself in, because you can come at that with a dispassionate eye and your expertise to sort of calculate that,
Yeah,
in
yeah.
the right kind of way.
I mean, because at the end of the day, what we're all trying to avoid is corporate manslaughter and
Yeah,
corporate homicide. And you have to, once you've identified the threat, you own it. You have to do something about it.
yeah,
So we're all trying to avoid that, but it's justification of why. And so if we're talking about a security manager, or why do you want that? Why do you want that particular system in place? Well, it's because the vulnerability of the asset that we're trying to protect. So we need to spend more money on that because we can't do without that asset if it went.
yeah, yeah. What's the situation regarding like technology in your world? It's quite with AI and things like that. So there's I think
Very
there
interesting.
are,
I mean,
yeah,
AI has had this huge impact on everything. And what is happening is that the hardware that has to be made to utilize the artificial intelligence is way behind the curve.
right,
Again, convergence. One of the questions that I ask him when I do the training, risk management training, is: Are we ever going to be able to do away with the human influence within security management? And not altogether, but I think going to become more and more, more and more relevant as we move forward, because so many. For example, last week I was discussing amongst my students, and if you put one man, a man guard, okay, 24/7, 365, on a basic wage, that person with all the pensions and all the rest of it would probably work out about 150,000.
yeah,
Okay, yeah. In a couple of years' time, if it's going to do as they say they're going to do with Tesla and all the rest of it, you can buy a robot for that.
Mm.
I know it sounds science fiction, but you can actually buy, you will be able to buy a robot for 150,000. You've got your capital outlay there. You've got operational costs will be less, but you've then got that, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
And that's something that I also do for my clients, is that I save them money in regards to, I look at what they've got in place, and then I use technology to
yeah,
replace the obvious way, the obvious system, which is the man guard.
yeah,
For me, we've got so much technology. Why are we relying on somebody when we can actually use that and integrate it through a control room?
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. I think there's some quite good stuff, isn't there? Clever stuff around like CCTV to like spot things, and I suppose
yeah,
that's
you can
a
program
real
that to
benefit.
actually motion detection. So we can move away from intruder detection systems. We can have it in the camera. We can have your camera to talk to people. It's drones. Yeah, you're using drones quite a bit now for
Yeah,
perimeter. Yeah.
yeah, amazing. So in 5 years' time, is the world of security risk management going to be fundamentally totally different than it is now?
I think it's gonna, yeah, if it's not already changed massively, it's going to be on the cusp of changing.
Yeah,
And as I mentioned to you, it's us being, or it's the manufacturers being able to utilize that new intelligence and put it into a device that can, yeah, and when we look at um, drones, and when we look at cameras, the technology pushing that is from China.
right.
And of course, if you're dealing with American clients like I do, then that's problematic because they can't
Yes, yeah,
have anything to do with it, you know?
no, yeah, yeah, yeah. Going back to our black or white and geopolitical problems, and
Yeah, yeah.
it's all a big circle, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's so much going on at the moment, isn't it? So much going on with everything.
Yeah, yeah. So you mentioned Martin's Law.
Yes.
How well prepared are organisations for that legislation in particular, or any other kind of upcoming legislation that's going to change the requirements on people?
I mean, it's going to impact. It's going to impact on publicly accessible locations. Absolutely. Um, uh, it's not going to be as robust as people thought.
Right.
Um, the level three course that we'll end up, well, I'm hoping that we'll end up writing. I think we'll get the contract for it, because we've just done the level four for them as well. I think it's going to be not as yeah, it's not going to be the big thing. However, it will have legal implications,
Yeah.
and the big thing with that as well is that who's going to actually enforce it? Who's going to enforce Martin's Law if you break it as a pub or a library
Mm.
or a restaurant? What's the system going to be in place? Yeah, very. It's all up in the air at the moment. We don't know, and anybody
Yeah.
that says that they know is
Yeah. So was it sort of watered down slightly from what people were expecting or fearing, maybe in some cases, in terms of how
well, when you
stringent
look
it
at
was going
it.
to be, just from a practicality perspective? Or
Yeah, I mean the thing is there was opposition to actually it coming in, because when you look at it, do we have enough legislation in place anyway? We've got corporate manslaughter law, we've got health and safety 1974, we've got a whole raft of legislation in this country, and when you look at it, it's only what good operators were doing anyway. Good
yeah,
operators will have these things in place. So what you're doing is the you're bringing those at the bottom up to a certain level, um, but it can't be too onerous cost wise,
yeah,
because businesses are really struggling at the moment,
mm,
especially in the hospitality, and this is going
yeah,
to hit hospitality, and again, you said it, it's another weight on already heavy shoulders.
mm,
So it can't, yeah, it'll be there. It'll be significant, but it's not going to be as robust as people expect it to be.
yeah. I guess that kind of makes sense in the perspective of, you want to, if you're the government, it's the sort of stragglers that you need to lift up, isn't it? And because if you've got that, if you've got sort of organisations that are not doing much, they're probably going to be the targets, I guess. Because
Well,
it's like if you on my street, we've got a abandoned burglar alarm, and it's plus, bang on the front of our house, and that's a deterrent, right? So
yeah,
if a
yeah.
burglar comes along, we probably won't go for that house because they've got a burglar alarm. Let's find one without a burglar alarm.
Yeah, yeah, and it's crime prevention, isn't it? What you've just mentioned is crime prevention.
Yeah,
It doesn't stop crime; it just
right.
moves it around. So you have a hard target, and so you make your place a hard target. You put layers of security in there, and the bad people will look at it and they'll go somewhere else. So you just move it around. You're not
Yeah,
stopping it. Yeah. So this will be more target hardening, but even after that, there will be softer targets.
of course. Yeah,
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 and I mean, when we look at hostile reconnaissance with the terrorists and things, and unfortunately, we live in a time where people want to hurt us. They
mm,
really do, and it's only going to get, in my opinion, and in a lot of other security professionals, it's only going to get a lot worse. It's not going to
yeah,
get better.
yeah. Well, we definitely can't end the podcast on that note because that would be a bit
Ah,
of a sad way. Not we're not finished yet anyway, but yeah, just made me think. If we think about the audience then that are joining us today, safety professionals, what's one misconception about security that you wish more health and safety professionals understood better?
well, security in general is looked at it's something that creates problems. It creates more hurdles for people to jump over, more hoops for them to jump through. And what the security professionals are out there trying to do is like health and safety, is to provide a safe and secure environment to work within, and that has
Mm,
benefits for the overall business, staff retention, more profitability. It needs to be looked at in that respect. However, that comes down to the professionalism of the security manager. Are they seen as they see themselves as another police officer that comes around telling you what to do, or do they advise you on how to do it? The best way to get some things across is to actually advise and not sort of
yeah,
order people around. So it's that professionalism. We need to get more professional, and we are. I believe with
yeah,
it.
yeah. I mean, it's very similar to the challenges faced by health and safety. You see in the tabloid press, health and safety gone mad, and there are these perception issues, aren't there? And we're the fun police. Whereas actually we want to be enablers and drivers of success and growth and profit in the business. So, I think um, my advice to any health and safety person who maybe has some of those misconceptions about security is think about if she was on the other foot and it was somebody thinking about safety, and be open minded and be keen to collaborate and work together because yeah, we're all trying to achieve the same kind of thing at the end of the day, aren't we?
Absolutely, and I think when you look at health and safety and security, the security management, I think the HR department are um, they they're the guys on the blocks that are actually policing the organization now. I think they
Yeah,
get in, their role is they've got definite mission creep.
yeah,
But
definitely, yeah,
but then again, I mean, we have to, as professionals, we have to be working with all the different departments. When we
of
look at
course,
inside the risk, go back to inside the risk, HR and the knowledge that we can give them about insiders is really crucial, really
mm,
crucial. Behavioral detection, um, finding out about their backgrounds, things like that. Not to be intrusive, but obviously we need to understand who they are. Why have they changed? Why has their demeanor changed? Are they, that? So there's a lot of interaction that can take place between the various departments.
yeah, yeah. Are there any resources or sort of key steps, like a process that you'd recommend a safety professional to go through to learn a bit more about this world of security and kind of future-proof their organization?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, the free resource is the NPSA, National Protection Security Advisory. That is a great source. It's got lots of things on all different aspects: terrorism, insider threat, response plans. Really, really good resource. So I would recommend people have a look at that. If they want more courses, they want internal training, come and see me. If they want to save money, come and see me. Uh, yeah, but the MPSA, really, really good starter.
Yeah. And then finally, Richard, you wrote a book, a fiction book. Tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, okay. Let me.
You must have a copy on the shelf somewhere. But I always have.
Oh, you caught
I
me
always have.
unexpected there.
I always have a copy of my book sitting right next to me on my desk. Although my book's much less interesting than yours, obviously, because mine's not fiction. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So this is Damascus Redemption. This was released a few years ago. It's a parallel story that runs the time of the Third Crusade in 1191 and Iraq 2007. And people have likened it to Andy McNabb's Bravo 20 meets Dan Brown's Da Vinci Code. And I'm writing the second one, which is finding the tomb of Alexander the Great in Afghanistan.
oh, nice, very
Yeah,
good.
so that's project. That's a work in progress. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Right, well, lots of respect for writing a book, because I know it's difficult. I've not done fiction, obviously, but even a non-fiction book is hard enough. Um, given you were literally a storyteller, how important do you think that skill is in, going back to what we were talking about earlier, winning the hearts and minds, getting the investment? What do you think that's a really important skill for
What
people to have?
really anecdotes, yeah, real life examples are key. And that's something I do, and I get critiqued on through my training courses. I'll spend a week with somebody, with a group of people, and the actual talk about the subject, and then put it into a real life scenario with a story. Yeah, I think it's a key skill. Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. Especially, I'd say, with that sort of like, if you can find an example of where something's happened, you've identified a hazard in safety or a risk in security. Could you find an example of where that has actually happened to another organization, ideally a similar organization, and then kind of build that story around what was the effect on the organization and the people, the CEO or whoever it is that's got to make
Yeah,
that decision
absolutely.
to
I mean,
to
I
invest?
give
Yeah,
the I give the example of one of my first jobs in security management. I was in Afghanistan, and I had the sack. I had the sack from that job. Now that's a real story. I was vindicated in the end. But yeah, I mean, they didn't like what I was telling them. I was telling them what I thought was going to happen, the likelihood of the impact, and because I was too vocal with that, they actually said, "No, no, we don't want you anymore."
yeah,
And yeah, so I use that as an example, and I say to them that you learn more from your mistakes than you do from your actual your successes, because you should be critiquing it. Why did that happen? And the reason that I ended up in that situation was, at that stage of my career, I wasn't a good communicator. I
right,
wasn't able to talk to them in a language that they could understand and be able to, yeah, get that message over. And simply
yeah,
because of that, so it's really
yeah, yeah,
important.
yeah, definitely agree with that. Great stuff. Well, thank you so much, Richard. Really enjoyed our conversation today. Where is the best place for people to learn more, contact you, or have you got anything other than buying your book? Have you got anything you'd like to
Yeah,
plug or
well, I
share?
mean,
Um,
we've got two websites. We've got the risk consultancy, which is the technical, it's the risk management, it's all that training and all the rest of it. And then there's the media one, which I'm going to be spending a lot of time on this year as we come to the release of the book. And that's richardcpendry.com. And
but
there's a lot of stuff going on. I was out in Normandy parachuting, where we recently, not last week, the week before, unfortunately, getting there and all the rest of it, we couldn't jump in because it was too windy. But previous to that, I was in Arnhem. I jumped into Arnhem out of a Second World War vintage plane. That was really amazing. So I've got all these things to put on the website and the YouTube channel. So I use my consultancy to earn the money so I can then go off and do the things that I enjoy.
Yeah, that's a good way to live life.
Yeah.
And with that, I'm going to go and play golf.
Brilliant. Okay,
I'm not actually going to play golf.
It's a lovely weather outside. It's gorgeous today. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. I'm just getting back into golf. So if anybody's listening and they want a game of golf in and around London, then send me a message and we'll set something up.
Oh, the other thing as well we've got to say is that we're involved with this ISO 31000 course. Yeah. So anybody that wants to find out about that, please get in touch as well. That's in September.
Yeah. We're going to have an episode talking about that coming up in a couple of weeks as well. So with a bit more detail. So yeah, look out for that one. Lovely. Great. Well, thank you so much, Richard. Really enjoyed it.
Pleasure. Thanks, Christian.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. And thanks to you for joining Richard and I today. And we will see you again on next week's podcast. Cheers.
Thanks for joining us on the Safety and Risk Success podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please hit follow and do share on social media. Does anyone you know spring to mind as a great guest, even yourself? If so, please contact us on podcast@slipsafety.co.uk. See you next week for another episode.